So in rabbinical school, they teach you rabbinical school Latin, which means I know about 5 things in Latin that are mostly useless. I know hapax legomenon, which sounds like hapax legomenon. I know chiasmus, and I know Deuteronomy. I can figure Deuteronomy out because they taught me enough Latin in rabbinical school for that. Deutero means like two, like in French. I know Spanish. Did I do it right? All right, Gail says I did it right. So, and nomos, word. I think it means word. It might mean law. I'm pretty sure it means word. It means logos and nomos. One means law and one means word. I never remember which one's which, but you'll believe me if I say it with confidence. Let's try again. It means the word again. We're starting this week the beginning of the end of Torah, which for your clergy means that we need to start planning for high holidays. But for most people, we're starting the last book. And in the last book, Moses he tells the story again. He reminds the Israelites, after 40 years of wandering, tells them where they came from and how they got to this moment as they are at the edge of arriving to the promised land. And in the description of what he talks about this week, he's talking about this moment they're not at Sinai yet, but it's this moment before where he's talking with his father-in-law about the needs of leadership, of how to take care of this people. And he says, there are so many of you. And he echoes back to, what happens in Genesis. In Genesis, Abraham gets this blessing that his son gets and his son's son gets. These blessings that speak to what Abraham will receive because of the merit of who he was and the relationship he had with God. God says that Abraham's descendants will be two things. At one point, he says, as many to be counted as the sands of the sea. It's a lot. At another moment, God describes that Abraham's descendants will be counted as the stars of the sky. Also a lot. In this moment, here, as Moses is talking to the people, 40 years after leaving Egypt, 40 years of wandering, he says, look at you. You are counted as the stars of the sky. There are so many of you. And our sages say that we can't count all the stars, but the stars are more than that many multitudes of people. We learn every time that this blessing comes up. When it talks about the children of Israel, the Jewish people, what will eventually become to be known as the Jewish people, being as the stars of the sky, described not as a number, but as a quality. What are we? What will we be? How will we be counted? We'll be counted like stars. We're not just like the dirt and the dust. We're stars. Things that are meant to shine and sparkle and bring light and comfort in a dark time. It's not the whole purpose of Moses' speech at that moment, but it matters. This moment, as the people who are getting ready for this next chapter, without the leader that they always knew, after having been slaves in Egypt for 400 years, as they're about to inherit this promise that was promised so long ago, they're reminded that there's a quality of character of what it means to be part of this nation. Not good for you, you are. Here is how you ought to be counted. Here is what you ought to be. And that becomes a core part of the Jewish identity. Like we talk about language of chosenness, which, do I need to go back? Or are we okay? We'll crackle again? We'll see if we crackle. Maybe just my beard today. I'll move it out a little bit. All right. This idea of chosen, where are we chosen from? Are we chosen to? There's something about what it means to be part of this nation that is calling to be part of the best part of ourselves. If we look a little later in Moses' description, he's recounting the various wanderings and the places they went and the people they had to walk through. And at one point, Moses talks about walking through the land of Edom, the descendants of Esau. And this moment provides a contrast. We're described first as like the stars. But when the Israelites walk through Esau's land, Esau, who, if you can remember, Jacob's brother, way back or in a couple months, we cycle around, we'll get it again. Esau, who's Jacob's brother, not the one who gets the blessing and the inheritance, but still a descendant of that line. God says, don't touch any of their stuff. That's not yours. You don't get that. That land I give to Esau's descendants, which is interesting. So often we talk about Torah, we talk about the land that God has chosen for the Jewish people. But also, Torah describes God as master of history, as the one who dictates the flow of human events, and that land is given to someone else in this other part of the Levant. That's another word they only say in rabbinical school. The Middle East-ish, right? Yes, there's something sparkly about the Jewish people, but don't think you're the only ones that sparkle. Don't think you're the only ones chosen with purpose. Don't think you're the only ones who have mission, who God sees and who God counts. It's these two truths that we have to hold. We've talked a lot this year about holding multiple truths at the same time. We have both this particularist call. We are chosen. We are shiny and sparkly and special. We have a calling, something that we're supposed to be, to constantly yearn to be worthy of the blessing of being called like the stars of the sky, of being a light during a dark time. But don't allow that to lift you above and beyond other people. You are also one of the many nations of the world. You have to learn to live and share and work with peoples who are different than you. This might be a preview of a high holiday sermon, I'm not sure. And I might invite you to come talk about it more later in September if I can get the documentary people to give us access to the documentary. But any listeners of The Daily in the house? All right. I love The Daily. There was a couple weeks ago, there was an interview with Robert Putnam, who wrote Bowling Alone, pop psychology for those who like that. He has a new book out. He has a new documentary out. The documentary is called Join or Die. It's about the need for community and joining clubs. I'm going to see if we can get the documentary. We'll watch together, we'll talk about it, and then I'll write a high holiday sermon about our conversation. That's a lot of work. We'll do that later. For now, one of the things that he talks about in that interview is he talks about different kinds of relationships that we need to have. He talks about bridging relationships, about seeing the other nations of the world and needing to be in conversation with people who are different, who have different life experiences, who come from different places, whose values might not be exactly the same as yours, but when we insist on being in conversation across lines of difference, we strengthen community. He says we need that. We need to bridge. We need to walk through the land of Esau and chat. Not to grab and take and say, this is mine, but to learn to live and to share and to be in connection and community. And he also talks about the other kind of relationship he describes as bonding relationships. That safe space. When you come, the place that feels like warm apple pie, where it's comfortable and it's easy, that we need that to sustain and strengthen us. And if we don't hold those in balance, we lose the nature of what it means to be part of community. As we begin this retelling that gets us ready to walk into the land and inherit this generations-long promise, we have to do both. We have to remember that we're part of a community of nations, that we need to be in relationship with people who don't pray like us, don't look like us, don't eat the foods that we eat, think and read and understand the world differently. And we need to see ourselves as worthy of these incredible blessings that are described in this book that we choose to read every year. A calling to be light in a dark place, to have something that sparkles and shines, to be the people who stood at the base of a mountain and received a mission and a purpose and a calling to make the world one that has a little more light and a little less darkness. We're in a season of that right now in the Jewish calendar. Right now, on Monday, Monday night to Tuesday, is the darkest time of the Jewish year. And then we start to make our way towards rebuilding and something new and towards a new home and new light. We have work in these months that lead up to Tishrei, that lead up to Rosh Hashanah, to hold multiple truths together and build communities worthy of the stories and worthy of the blessings that we inherit. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may we be worthy of all that came before and all that we are working towards. Shabbos.